Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to episode 13 of the Conscious Hotline, your source for all things conscious and hot. My name is Lakshmi, and I am so excited to be joined by an incredible trauma host who is going to be sharing with us how boundaries create self-love and compassion. And so I'm so excited to have her today. And she'll be connecting with us shortly. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments while we're going live, and we'll answer them in a moment for you. Hi, Queen.
Hi, beautiful. How are you?
I am running around. Today's one of those days. How are you?
Girl, I feel you. My energy's kind of like all over the place, you know? There's like so much fire.
Let's take a breath or something, you know? Like
Totally. Oh, that felt so good to do.
Yeah, it's
we're like doing, and we forget to be like, okay, hold up. Like I need a breather for a second.
I have a reminder that goes off of my calendar at noon every day that's like, breathe, stretch, drink some water.
Oh yeah, totally. Because like we forget to do those like obvious things, you know?
Yeah.
That we feel are obvious, and we're just kind of going about life. And then we're like, oh, wait, I should drink water because I have like a massive migraine, and maybe that's why.
I'm going to get one of those gallon water bottles.
Oh, I have one of those. They're so good.
You do it? Do you drink a gallon?
Yeah, I do that. I've done it so many times, and I've fallen off recently, but it's so good.
It's so good. Well, you're so good, Yasmin. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we kick off every episode with kind of like a juicy get to know you.
I love it.
So I would love to know if you, and this one's just like silly, but if you were a flavor of ice cream, what flavor would you be and why?
Chocolate, 100%.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
That's my own heart. Tell me more.
Yeah, why? Because chocolate's so tasty, yummy, delicious. It's rich, you know, it's just, I don't know, it just aligns so well with me. Just love chocolate. Yeah. I love chocolate everything, so.
Yes, same.
Yeah, definitely.
Love it. Good. Well, thank you again. Someone was like chocolate, LOL. It's like, hey, I love chocolate. What can I say? So good. So good. I want to make a lot of jokes, but I'm like,
I know, me too. I think we get it. Like, we're on that same wave.
Yeah, I see you, girl.
This is the perfect way to start off. I love it.
I know. It's so good. It's like, okay, now that we've established that we both like chocolate. I'm dead. Okay.
That's how you know this is about to be a good conversation.
For real. Like starting there, it can only go up. So I love and admire and respect what you do as a trauma coach because everyone's experienced so much trauma. And like one of our people that are tuning in right now, he was a guest on our show, Curtis. Hi, Curtis. Right. And he shared a lot of his trauma and how he's used it to build himself up. And so, you know, I'd love to start first with your why. Why be a trauma coach, your own journey with it.
Right. So my why, I love coming back to this because I'm like, you know, when I get so burnt out because it's so much work to put in, I always come back to thinking, why am I doing this? And my intention is always to help others find their power. You know, I want to help others step into that place of, I'm good, you know, I'm working on myself. I'm not perfect, but I am working towards that place of feeling good in my internal world and just, you know, being who I am, being my authentic self. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what we want, is we want to be authentic and we want other people to be authentic with us.
Yeah, so, but I think it's really easy to say like, oh, be yourself, everyone else is taken. And it's totally different to be like, wow, like who I am may put off other people or may separate me from others, and I'm still going to do it.
Exactly, and that's okay, you know, because that means you're doing something right. That means you're being, as long as you're assertively communicating and being like who you are and speaking your truth, you're good. You know, just keep doing
it. So tell me a little bit about your background, because you saying assertive and your name being Yasmin. I'm like, how cultural is that?
I love it. My background in terms of like where, like what my catalyst was, is that what you're asking?
All of it.
Beautiful. So the reason why I always wanted to do coaching, and I always wanted to get into, I love psychology. I love learning about the psyche and why we act the way we act and who we are and why we're here, our purpose, all the things, you know? And as a kid, I always wanted to get into that. But of course, the social conditioning of be a doctor, be a lawyer, be something this, you know, and especially when it's like coming.
Where are your parents from?
So my dad's Egyptian and my mom's Colombian.
Oh, yes. So you have, my dad's Indian, so you can be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. Or you can marry one of those three. That's like...
Those are your options. It's A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
You can't pick out.
Parents are tough. They are like strict.
Exactly. So I grew up with my dad being super strict, and you know, these have to be the things. And if I wanted to be a psychologist, it's like, oh, like that's not good. You know, there was this stigma, obviously, with mental health of, if you want to get into that, you know, you're going to be crazy. You're going to pick up on other people's shit and this and that. And I'm like, I don't believe in that, but okay. I'm sure it's difficult and there has to be boundaries, but that's not necessarily, you know, what that means.
But I also think that speaks to like our parents, both generationally, but then also geographically. There's so much stigma around mental health and self-care. And like, side note, I want to come back to you. Funny story. Insert here. We were having a big family like barbecue on Saturday, and my sister was like, "Oh, I have to leave at 5 before 5 because I have therapy at 5:30." And my dad was like, "What? You're in therapy?" And then she's like, "Yeah, I'm just like taking care of my mental health. You know, it's a pandemic. I just switched jobs. I'm getting ready for grad school. Like, there's a lot going on. I just got married." And he's like, "You don't need therapy. Go for a run every day when the sun rises. If you go for a run every day when the sun rises and you're still depressed, then kill yourself." And it was just like, oh my God, like parents just don't like.
No, because they didn't have that safe
trying
container.
to explain to your Southeast Asian parents like mental health.
Totally. They didn't have that safe container growing up. You know, I feel so blessed that we have social media and we have all these tools and things that it's just not weird anymore to talk about that. It's not weird to tell someone, "Hey, I'm in therapy." This is like the new norm, which is amazing. I love that. I love that people are into spirituality and figuring out what they want, what they don't want, their boundaries. Like, my parents don't know shit about boundaries. You know what I mean? Like,
and then they're like, we try to establish them because it's like, wait, what? Yeah. So my dad went on to be like, if your therapist is seeing patients at 5:30 on a Saturday, they have no boundaries, they have no work-life balance, and they're miserable. Miserable therapist, miserable clients. I was just like, oh my God.
It's like, uh-oh, here goes the rant.
I know, it would have been better if she'd said, like, I'm going to go home and pray. You know, he would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, go home and pray. That's great.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. There's just so much, you know, culturally, geographically, like, you know, just there's so many differences now that we're stepping into. I love it. It's my favorite. I love stepping out of that status quo, you know. It's the way all of that. I don't know if you heard that because you like froze for a second. You're good.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So yeah, I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to be in coaching and psychology, but I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna get into marketing. You know, like I was in fashion, I modeled for a while, and that I loved it, and it was like
it shows.
Exactly.
You're conscious and hot. That's why you're on the Conscious Hotline.
It's like, but then I quickly came to realize, I was like, as much as I think that this is fun and I love it, it's not passion and it's not my purpose. You know, like it doesn't bring that out of me of like, it's not a full body yes of I want to be a supermodel. You know, like that.
And it's either a full body yes or it's a hell no.
Exactly. That's what I always say. It's either a full body yes or a hell. There's no hell maybe. You know, for me, there is no hell maybe. It's like,
yes or no. Because with guys, I'm like, well, maybe he'll grow on me, or like, I don't know, let me learn more about him.
Right. It's like, let me give him a chance. Let me do this. And it's like, no. If it's a no, it's a no, and it's gonna be a no, and that's it. Move on. So yeah, I did all those things, and I realized quickly, I was like, this doesn't feel right. But I was so afraid of coming out of that box and stepping into coaching. So what ended up happening?
What were some of your fears?
I think one of my fears was being judged for it, and being kind of being an authority figure there, and I didn't know what my power was, and I didn't know how to find it. I literally, my self-esteem was not in the place that I wanted to be at, and that was one of my fears. Is like, how do I even step out of that? Like imposter syndrome. Like, what the hell do I know? You know, I'm young, I'm this, I'm that, and all these things, all these narratives, all these stories that I would replay. It's like, am I really qualified to be a coach? Am I really qualified to help someone else? Am I qualified to be responsible for someone else's life and feelings and all that stuff? And that was really scary for me. That was a really scary thought. And so that held me back. You know, every time I wanted to, it was like, nah, I'm not going to do it. Forget it. I'm happy where I am. And that was a lie because I wasn't happy with where I was.
Yeah, I'm happy working in an office job.
Exactly. It was like the typical
that no one ever.
That we're not happy in, because that's not our purpose. That's not why we're here, you know? So we're like, as long as there's purpose behind, it's not even about the 9 to 5. It's more so about what's the purpose behind the 9 to 5, you know, like what's the intention? What do you want from this?
And what's the energy behind it? Because that's another thing with fashion. I used to model, and like the energy can be really comparison, better than, blah, blah, blah. It's just
competitive. Like, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Everything was all about like, it was all ego. You know, like that's what I felt. It was more so like fulfilling my ego. And then that got to a point of like, this isn't lasting because it's just fulfilling my ego. It's going to get to a point where I'm going to realize that I want to fulfill my soul. You know, I want my life to be soul fulfilling. I want it to be passionate and amazing on a soul level, not just an ego level, because that's going to go away in a few months. You know, that feeling that it's kind of like getting into a relationship and you're lusting the person. And then you realize down the line, like, this is not someone that is a long-term partner that I want to be with for the long term. And then you're like, okay, so the lust here is gone.
And that can be a big
gone. We're done here. Yeah.
That can be a huge, like, what? Am I crazy? Was I living in a lie?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
did that happen to you as you stepped out of this ego job and into your soul's purpose?
Yes, exactly. And
did
so
it feel like a fall from grace?
It went yeah, what pushed me was my breakup, my ex-boyfriend. You know, that's what pushed me, because that was really
Thank you. Next. I'm so fucking grateful for my ex. Yeah, for real. I'm so grateful for my ex.
Cue the song.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. So that's what ended up happening. I was just like, okay, like, this was traumatic. It was a roller coaster ride. It was a 4-year relationship, and there was a lot of learning in those 4 years. And I realized after the breakup, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm definitely ready now, because I'm embodying what I want to teach to others. You know, I want to lead by integrity, and that was always my goal and my purpose, was no matter what I do or what career path I take or what job I'm in, I want to lead with integrity. And the only way to do that is by actually stepping into that role and experiencing it, you know, and knowing how to help other people because I've experienced it or because I have the knowledge of it. So that was really helpful to me, and that really pushed me out. I was just like, okay, universe is telling me, like, girl, it's time. You've been holding back for a very long time. You weren't listening to me before. So now you're going to listen. Yeah. And I did.
I feel like God has this way for me of like little crumb, little hint, little this, little that. And then at a certain point, it's like, crash your car, face your shit, you know?
And it's like, and then it gets really painful because you weren't listening before. You weren't listening to the signs that were, you know, obvious, and you were kind of just like passing them. You're like, no, I don't want to make the wrong decision, because we're afraid to trust our intuition. And that leads us into this spiral of like, I'm scared of making the wrong decision. I don't want to do that. You know, let's just continue and see what happens. And you always have hope that the situation is going to change. So that's another thing. Is like you get into this place of like, I have hope that things are going to change, and that's why I'm going to be patient and I'm going to stay with this person, or I'm going to continue this career, or whatever the case is. Yeah. So right after that, I was like, nope, I'm doing it. And I jumped in. I was scared shitless. I didn't know how to even start. But one day I saw this coach that I follow, and she had just opened up her doors to a certification program. And it just came up. It was a sponsored story. It wasn't even like a story of...
I call that the Instagram gods. When the Instagram gods are in your favor.
Yeah. Exactly. And I was like...
Instagram gods are great. I like fell in love off Instagram once. I was like, I love the Instagram gods. They are working for me.
I love it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm supposed to swipe up and sign up. And that's exactly what I did. And I was like, it's happening. I'm starting. I love this. And I did it. And I was just so happy. And I'm like, it was a full body yes. And I was
but
like,
also coaching school is a trip, because I was learning about everything that I needed to do for myself and healing my own stuff, while simultaneously being taught how to hold space for others. And there's definitely that component of like, I'm supposed to do this for other people, but like I got so much of my own stuff to get through, you know? So
That's exactly it. It's almost like, oh my God, I have so much to do. And it's the thing is, we always will have so much to do. You know, that's never going to end, and it's always going to be a journey. And as long as we can like continue to work on the things that we have to work on while still helping other people, I think that that is so like amazing. You know, that's really.
And I also think there's this fine line. There's this comedian I follow that I love. I can't remember his name. It's like JT Spam something, but he does
JP Spears or whatever.
Yeah, he does
Oh,
impersonations.
he's so funny. Yeah, he's hilarious.
And he does one where he's like, "This is my impersonation of people doing the work," and it's like, you know, I'm just doing the work, and it's hard, and I'm doing it, and this work, it's just like you have to do it and you have to go through it. And it's like, I think there's this balance of doing the work and not getting stuck in the work. And like now I live with my Indian dad, and it's been amazing to be a coach and be a healer in a space where he's a healer and he's a spiritual teacher and guide, but in a way that's like, stop talking about the past, you know, live in the present. And it's like,
right.
Well, yeah, but sometimes you got to process the past to be in the present. But I agree, there's got to be this balance. And so how do you hold that for yourself and for others with trauma specific? Because, I mean, advertising yourself as a trauma coach is, you're really opening yourself up to exactly that.
It's hard. It's so hard. It's so hard because trauma is something that we are so afraid of being so vulnerable about it, with good reason. It's something that we hold so deeply, and it's hard to like trust people with that. You know, when someone comes to you and they have a trauma, whether it's an addiction or they had an abortion or they were raped or anything like that, those are big situations. Those are really big triggering situations, and it's hard to express that and to be open about those situations. You know, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to also bring it back up, especially if you've like kind of hid it in the corner for a very long time, you know? So I love that you said that there has to be a balance, because we can't always be in this place of like doing the work, you know, and like shadow work. And it's like such a buzzword right now. Shadow work is so big, especially
it's so
right now.
hot right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a hot word. It's like, ooh, trendy. I love it.
But yeah, but then also there's the only like, what is shadow work? So like, what do you think shadow work is in your words?
So in my words, shadow work is looking at the parts of you that you've rejected for very long. Mm-hmm. And that could look like meditating on it. That could look like journaling. That could look like inner child healing. That could look so many ways, working with a therapist, working with a coach. You could do it alone. But the one thing I do say when people want to do it alone is there has to be a level of self-esteem and self-love. Because if you don't, and you're not really ready to look at those sides of you alone, that could be really, really extra triggering. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to be open to it. Like, that's the goal there, is like, you're kind of opening the doors to a very dark place. Are you ready to dive in? And that sounds really scary, but like that's something that I always tell people is like, are you ready to really, truly dive in? Are you willing to look at this? There's going to be resistance, just like there always is. Our ego is going to fight it, and our ego is going to be like, I don't want to look at that shit. Like, I'm perfect, you know?
And you
all want to think that. We all want to think that.
You are perfect. You're perfectly imperfect.
I don't need help. I'm good. But the reality is we all need help on some level. And if we're willing to accept that, and we're willing to like walk into those doors and feel confident about the fact that just because I have shadows doesn't mean I'm a flawed human being. It doesn't mean I am a bad person. It doesn't mean anything about me. It's like any of these stories that I hold on to, or any of these narratives that I hold on to, aren't real. You know, it's just a story that I'm literally not able to release.
The more I share my shadow, like even yesterday I met someone that was interested in coaching with me, and we went for a walk, and I was sharing my shadow stuff because I'm super real with my clients. I'm like, I'm not this perfect being that has it all figured out. I just am committed to this work and have researched it and studied it and am an expert in it, and I'm doing it, and I would love to support you in doing it. Exactly. And I was sharing my shadow, and he was like, wow, I've never heard anyone own that happened to them. And it's happened to me too. Thank you for saying that. And so I find that like the more we share our shadow, and I describe it as like, when you see someone at the bar and they have dead eyes and they're acting crazy and they're like totally inebriated, like that's their shadow self. Like that is a part of them.
Exactly. I love that you said that. So true. So true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're so right about that. It's like, you want to be vulnerable with this topic, because again, people want to feel like they're being seen and heard and understood. So when they're sharing the shadow, they don't want to look at you like, oh, you're above them, or you're better and you're this perfect human being because you're a coach, which is a misconception of a lot of people. Think that, oh, you're a coach, you must be perfect, you must not have any flaws. And it's like, no, I became one because I wanted to learn more about my flaws.
Yeah,
I suffered so much in this area that that's why I became a coach. So, and I'm still working through that, and I'm still learning so much about myself. That's never going to end. That's going to be a forever thing. And I'm committed to that path. That's hard, but I stay committed to that. And being able to really relate to someone else on that level creates this bond, this vulnerability, and this bond of authenticity and honesty too. Like straight up honesty, where you can't get more real than that, of talking about like the flaws that you have. And that's why I always say it's so important to have friends and family members that can be there to hear you out and that you can talk about these things with, because it makes it so much easier to really own it. And it makes it easier to be like, okay, I'm not the only one. Because I think our egos like to think that we're the only ones that are suffering or going.
Yeah, when in reality, separation is an illusion because we are all one. We want to really meta with it.
We come from the same source, so it's like, yeah, we all come from the same source. No matter where we're from, what we look like, we all come from the same source. Yeah. And, that's a massive trauma too this year, with so much division and so much separation that's been happening. And, that's not, like, it sucks that it is happening, and it sucks that it exists. It sucks that it has existed, and that is a trauma that we have to work through. But we do come from the same source, and it's so nice to be able to go to someone and be like, I'm going through the same shit you are. Let's talk about it.
And I think it's both, right? It's like we all come from the same source, and Black Lives Matter, and people are systemically treated differently based off of arbitrary, illusionary separation differences. And so it's like, okay, how can we create a more just and valued world where people are both honored as individuals, honored for their individual experience, and also given
collectively, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, absolutely. Finding that middle ground, that balance, because again, there's always a balance to everything, and finding that balance of like, how can all of these things be included? So we're. And
I don't think we as humans have ever had that balance. Like some matriarchies in Papua New Guinea that I've studied maybe had a good balance, but then again, it's a matriarchy, so I'm biased because I'm like, oh, women were in charge. It was probably great. Sounds like utopian paradise. But I do think that like our generation and Gen Z is being challenged with like, time's up. Racism, time's up. Sexism, time's up. Capitalism, time's up.
This needs to be healed. Like, what's happening here? Seriously. Yeah. And look at how it came up. Like, everyone's like actually going in their shell of like, how do I give into this? Because we all have in one way or another. How do I give into this? Like, what am I doing to add to this trauma? You know what I mean? And like, how can I help and do my part by shifting? And that right there is shadow work. Yeah.
So have you been doing shadow work with people around, internalized racism or their own work to do with race? Because, it's like, if you're not being actively anti-racist, you're racist. In today's world, like if you are not standing for Black lives, then you are not standing with Black lives.
Right. So it's great you brought that up, because I had a call with this girl a few weeks ago, and I did a podcast with her, right? And she told me how she's been feeling very heavily with this whole Black Lives Matter situation. And she's white, and she was like explaining how she was like really feeling it. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I definitely want to learn more about your perspective, and what is it that you're feeling exactly? And she's like, well, I had a situation when I was younger where I was in a group of friends, and they were all like white girls, and we were in that group, and they told me to go up to a Black girl and say something disrespectful. And she did it. And they were just like 11 years old. You know what I mean? So it was, they were young, and she was explaining to me, she's like, I didn't know any better at that age. And it was really traumatic, because I went up to the girl and I said something to her that was super disrespectful, because I wanted to be friends with that group. And I wanted to please the other girls that were telling me to go and say that. And she's like, now I think back to that situation, and I realize how much trauma I caused that girl, and how much she's probably feeling. And that
we
was,
don't know that. You can't give yourself that much power for someone else's trauma. It caused you trauma by traumatizing someone else.
And I was like, yeah, and that's wonderful that we can understand and feel like the other person has trauma, but this is not about other people. This is about you. It comes down to what you did. It comes down to your trauma. Because again, we're not blaming and pointing fingers, and we're not deflecting our own shit, because that's something that we tend to do when it comes to trauma and shadow work. It's like, oh, I wonder how the other person's feeling, or I wonder what happened with that person. It's like, no. We're going to come back to ourselves. We're going to come back to why we did this, what we're feeling in the moment, and how we can move forward with it. Not just stay in the misery, but how can we learn from that?
Because that's low-key what we want to do sometimes. It's like, let me just feel bad about it forever.
Yeah, no, and like, I'm so sorry, and that's it. And it's like, that's not enough. It's not enough to just say I'm sorry and move on, because guess what?
You have to look at the parts of yourself that want to belong so badly that you're willing to do something that negatively impacts another for your well-being. And where else in your life does that show up? Because it shows up every time we drive our cars. We're destroying the environment. Every time we buy non-organic produce, we're contributing to an industry that's, causing mass issues for the migrant workers that are harvesting and growing those foods full of pesticides and chemicals. Like, every choice is that choice. It's that choice of, do I want to belong and do what's easy, or do I want to do what's right? And it's more oftentimes cost effective and inconvenient. And that's the whole, like, being authentic in the face of people not wanting to mess with you anymore. So
yes, absolutely, exactly. So yeah, there's so much that goes into it. There's so much that goes into like shadow work and actually kind of getting to the root cause of why this comes up in my life. Why is this always happening? Why does this ugly side come out of me? And how can I better learn about myself so I'm not hurting other people in the process? So I'm more conscious. It comes down to conscious hotline. It comes down to being conscious of your actions and how those actions are affecting other people around you.
And then take it a step further for me. Let's talk boundaries. How does that translate into boundaries as a form of self-love and compassion?
Yeah, so boundaries is such a big topic too, and I love talking about this because boundaries are needed, and in every area of life. It's not just in romantic or in friendship. It's literally at work, it's with family, in any area. And I think one boundary that comes up is, for example, let's take the Black Lives Matter, the racism trauma, is setting a boundary when someone says something disrespectful or a racist remark, and being able to stand up, even if it's not towards you, it's still towards the collective, and it's still towards other people individually. So stand up for that and say, hey, I'm not comfortable with those kind of jokes, or I'm not comfortable with those kind of remarks. That didn't feel right. That didn't sit right with me. And knowing how to assertively communicate that as well, because you don't want to be aggressive. You want to get your point across, and you want to let the person know why this is an issue. Why I'm setting a boundary right now. And that's self-love. That's self-love. And that's not only for you, but it's also for other people. For our fellow brothers and sisters. Literally, it's for other people around us that deserve to be seen, deserve to be acknowledged, deserve to be heard.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was explaining to my mom. My mom was like, boundaries. Everyone's talking about boundaries. And like, she views it as a brick wall that you can't climb over and a barrier to love. And what I was trying to like break it down for her, and was like, look, like, you have a dog, you have a fenced in backyard, you built a gate so that the dog can't come out. That's a boundary. And that keeps your dog safe because you love your dog. And so like, I think about boundaries in that way of like, what fence do I need to build for myself so that everyone can play together in a way that feels safe and comfortable for everybody.
Yeah,
exactly. Keeping people together and like connected versus like keeping them out.
Right, because boundaries are not an ultimatum, and that's the thing that people confuse so much. It's like it becomes control at that point, and it's not about controlling what the other person does or doesn't do. It's about it's about setting a limit that makes you feel comfortable, like you said. It's like letting the person know, like, this is something that I'm not going to be okay with, or I need my space, or I need a couple of hours to myself every day, and I don't, or when I'm in a conflict with someone, give me like 20 minutes to cool down. Please don't barge in. Like that right there is a boundary. So you can be your best self, and you can show up as your best self for you and for the other person. But it's never about putting up that wall and putting up this ultimatum of like, if you do not do this, I will, do this. It's not a threat.
Well, so how to distinguish? Because I'm like, again, thinking about the thank you next, so grateful for my ex. Looking back, some of those boundaries weren't healthy or productive.
Right.
Right. And so how do we know what's a healthy boundary and what's control?
So control looks like I said, control looks like an ultimatum, and control looks like you telling that person, threatening them that if they don't do this, you will break up or you will leave, you know? And that it also comes down to how you communicate it. I notice a lot with people and with myself that whenever I communicate a certain boundary, I want to make sure that I'm saying it in a way that is compassionate and loving, you know, and that is assertive, and that is, I'm not saying anything about you or your behavior. I'm saying I feel. You know, we start with I feel statements of I feel unheard, or I don't feel seen when this situation happens. I would like for that to change. You know, so it really does come down to like the nitty gritties of the communication part, which is probably the hardest. Because when we're hurt and when we're triggered and when we want to set a boundary, we kind of just want to be like, fuck you, I don't want you to do this ever again. You know what I mean? And that's normal. We're human. But I think it really does come down to processing that and getting in touch with, what do you want first and foremost? What are some limits, or what are some things that you will and will not accept? And kind of checking in with yourself several times, because we change, you know, and our things change, and we might have a boundary one day, and then in 6 months it might be different. We might not have that boundary anymore.
Yeah.
So really kind of checking in with yourself and making sure, like, first of all, is this something that sits right with me? What are some things that are not okay with me? And writing it down, and then figuring out, how do I communicate this now?
Mm-hmm.
How do I tell the person that this doesn't sit right? And how can I say it in a way that makes me feel heard, and also in a way that that person gets it?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes down to listening to your intuition as well.
Well, that's kind of a perfect segue. You know, I obviously could talk to you forever. And unfortunately, we're going to have to do another call another time, because our time is coming to an end. But someone had asked in the comments, and I think this is a perfect end of, you know, how can we learn to be more receptive to the universe's signs?
So I think, oh my goodness, that's such a tough, that's tough.
Thank you, Brad Fish, for that one.
That's my boyfriend, by the way. Yeah, so that's really tough, because we have so many external things that are kind of blocking us from being in touch with ourselves and what it is that we want. You know, we have social media, we have TV, we have, you know, going out. And right now, I feel like people are so much more receptive because we are in a state of being with ourselves. There are no outside distractions anymore as there was before, you know? So I think a lot of it comes down to taking time to be with yourself, whether that's in nature, locked up in your room, or any place in the house where you feel more at peace, and kind of sitting with anything that comes up and allowing yourself to feel trust that whatever comes up, whatever your body's feeling, it's telling you something, you know, and being also receptive to any emotions that might be surfacing. I like to think of any emotions that come up are, you know, it's an alarm system. Your emotions are your alarm system. And if you're feeling anger, what's coming up for you? Like, why are you feeling angry? Was a boundary crossed? Do you feel powerless in a situation? Do you not feel like an authority somewhere in your life? Like, check in with that. You know, when you're anxious, are you out of alignment? Did someone do something that didn't sit right with you? Do you want to do something else with your life? Are you living your purpose? So really figuring that out. And the same with happy feelings. It's also important to check in. When do I feel most excited? When do I feel happiest? You know, where am I when I feel euphoric and good about myself and aligned and powerful and all these things? It's really kind of checking in with emotions. So I love to tell people, it's like, check in with your body and the emotions that are coming up for you. That right there is helping yourself be more aligned and figure out, you know, what's going on in your internal world.
Yeah. And I think The Body Keeps the Score is a great book to help people even learn.
I love that book.
Their body.
Yeah. And trauma gets stored in your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I can tell you are now an expert, and you are a powerful coach that's transforming people's lives and holding space for them to work through all of it so they can be all that they can be. So I want to thank you for gracing me with your presence. And this is definitely the beginning of a beautiful friendship and collaboration.
Absolutely. We got to do this again.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so amazing. You're awesome.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
You too. Bye, love.